Ghost in the building. We can. I'm just making some coffee. That's not an outside toy. Does it have buttons?
This is a button.
So does it have buttons? Does it make sounds? Does it have moving parts?
Now this moves. And also, let me show you something else.
So it's got sounds, lights, buttons, and moving parts?
Not lights. No.
It sounds like not a toy for outside.
Why?
Because it's got sounds, lights, moving parts, and buttons. Those are not toys we bring outside because that's how those toys get destroyed.
Then I'm going back to my TV.
Okay. What a guy. That can't be right. It's telling me there's 6 people in here. Oh, there it is. Now it's right. It's telling me 1. So.
Cosmo Kazo! How's it going today?
Spoiled Milk is back. Hello, Spoiled Milk. What's up? I'm pretty exhausted too. Our live stream last night was 14 hours, 14 and a half hours long. The one from yesterday. Oh no, it was longer than that. It was like 21 hours. I'll look at it again. It was long. It was like 21 and a half hours. Yeah, I was live for 21 and a half hours. And finally started falling asleep. And then this morning my kiddo got dropped off. So I ended the live stream and went back to bed. Here I am, 4 hours later. Yeah, let me see if I can pull it up here through the studio. Here it is. That's yesterday's, and there's your timestamp. If it'll ever focus, there it is, 21:44:58 for June 21. June 21. That's yesterday. 21 hours and 44 minutes. So that was a long one. Okie dokie. Tasteless! What's up, Jeremiah? How's it going, Jeremiah? Not sure if I know what that emoji is. Data. Tina's back. No surprise there. He's playing in his room. Oh no. Have you been practicing, Ghost? What's the loadout got to be? Is there a specific loadout, or you just got to use your whatever OG loadout you got? Yeah, Bottomless Prime. It's another streamer. Yeah, loadout. It's a reference to what guns you get from the loadout drop in Warzone, Call of Duty. Bottomless is having a tournament, and I think that the winner of the tournament's gonna get a $250 gift card, something like that. I think it's gonna be 10v10 or something like that. He's been advertising it for, well, I've been seeing it for about a week. But if you don't follow the Call of Duty stuff, then you wouldn't get that, so you wouldn't know. So yeah, Ghost, is there a specific loadout that you guys got to do for the competition? Is it going to be like melee and rocket launchers? No close range, no mid range weapon. Everything from a distance or in the trenches. Snipers and K bars. That's it. Snipers and K bars. That's it.
It is now officially noon.
It is now officially noon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for stopping in on your lunch hour. That means there is 1 hour left of the live stream's typical scheduled daily time slot. That also means it's time for more coffee. Yes, sir. More coffee. Jeez, this machine, it eats up water like it uses it. What the hell? What the helly? Maybe I can get an episode of my story in here. Let's see. Spoiler alert. If you're listening to my vampire system, you might hear some spoilers.
Would have believed such a tale. With that, Quinn wanted to talk to 2 more people before heading off. Sarah, Leo is one of the best people I ever met. You can rely on him a lot. After the Earl for me, Nian and Norvik tried their best to describe to him what the area of the nest crystal had looked like, but they had only been able to see it from a distance. They also didn't have as much trouble last time as they did this time. Perhaps because of them attempting to get the crystal already, it had caused it to be more on guard. Okay, everyone, please look after the Earl for me. Jess, make sure to get along with them as well. Don't worry, I won't be long. Maybe 2 minutes, Quinn stated. Before they could question what he meant by that, he had already left the shadow space. Landing in the strange sludge, he wasn't alone. Just as he had been warned, there were more than 100 versions of himself. As much as I would love to try to fight you all, I have other things I need to do, Quinn said. Nitro Accelerate activated. Running through the crowd of himselfs, none of them could keep up now that he had the active skill. At times, there would be those that would appear and get in his way, but Quinn, with his new speed and strength, not holding back on his ki, was able to beat even himself in a single hit. He hardly had to fight. As he got away from the initial lot as well, it seemed like the beasts couldn't form quick enough for him. Finally, in the distance, Quinn could see the nest crystal placed on a large leaf on a single mound of land. Stepping on the soil with them all behind him, Quinn didn't hesitate as he grabbed the crystal. Nest crystal has been obtained. Inside the shadow space, everyone was tapping their feet as they were wondering what was going on outside. They had been placed here, and the next second, before they could even question what their king was doing, he was already gone. You think he's still alive? Joy asked. It's only been 1 minute. Do you have that little faith in him? Rick questioned her. Besides, I think this space would collapse if he was dead. It's not a faith thing, Mo snapped back at Rick, who seemed to be quite boastful ever since Quinn had displayed his real strength. It was very annoying for the others. You saw the damage Earl Ronston sustained from the attack of just one of those things? Since our king used his ability, it means there will be dozens more of them. The beast seems to be able to copy even his strength. It was a mistake to go after the nest crystal when it was protected by those doppelgangers. We should have just gone and searched after another one. First you complain that he's weak, and now you say he is too strong, Rick mumbled as he shook his head at the same time. Not too far away from the group, it looked like someone was coming too. The Earl was slowly opening his eyes. He felt weak and tired, even with the blood infusion, but he had recovered enough to get up. When opening his eyes, the first thing he could see was a set of large eyes staring right back at him, and white fur, lots of fur. What in the... Ronston shouted while quickly crawling backwards. It took him a moment to recognize the familiar-looking gorilla who had been staring at him, and he began to notice the space that he was in. Looks like you're alive, old friend, Norvik cheerfully greeted the Earl. His Majesty's beast companion seems to have taken an interest in you and has been protecting you. And you just left me in the care of a beast? The Earl complained, but seemingly understanding the words. Jask snorted in disdain, forcing the vampire lord to clear his throat in embarrassment. You did a great job, allowing such a handsome beast to protect me.
Hello.
I'm sure it was following His Majesty's order. I shall praise your hard work once he comes back. Hearing these words, Jesk smiled widely and pounded himself on the chest. For now, all we can do is wait, but I really wonder what exactly this place is, Nian commented. It looks endless, and I can't see anything else in here with us, but I'm not the only one that can sense that, right? The younger ones looked at each other strangely, but the other Viscount and Earl knew exactly what Nian was talking about. A dull energy, not quite a life, but a strong one. Outside, Quinn had obtained the nest crystal, which he now held in his hand. It was a fascinating object, and being as big as an ostrich egg, it could barely fit in a single hand. Before he decided what to do with it, he needed to make sure he was safe first. The first thing he attempted to do was either place it in his shadow space or his system, like other crystals he obtained. However, when trying to do so, it seemed like with this particular crystal, none of those options were exactly working. Before retrieving the nest crystal, there were quite a few doppelgangers that had been following him, and more had appeared near the Now there was nothing, and even the strange sludge that they were on had almost lost its color and consistency, as it was slowly turning back into murky-colored water. Those strange beasts, they weren't really beasts in the first place. They must have all been from the power of this nest crystal, Quinn thought. When Logan had obtained his nest crystal, the beast didn't disappear, but were just no longer interested in protecting it. This is a little different, though. Those beasts seemed to come from that strange sludge itself and were powered by the nest crystal. Just holding it in his hand, he could feel a smidgen of how much power it had. He realized how it was able to do great things, how it was able to create unlimited clones and beasts. What he had right now in his hand was definitely something special. For a moment, he even wondered if it might be possible to weaponize its ability to summon doppelgangers to have them deal with the Dalki. Is it really impossible to turn one of these into a weapon? Seeing that the area was somewhat clear, Quinn was thinking about what to do. He wanted to absorb the crystal now into his system, but was a little worried. When evolving his own body, sometimes he wasn't in the best of shapes or states. He had no idea what a system upgrade would do. So with the little time he had left from his armor's ability before it went on cooldown, Quinn ran and ran until he eventually reached the ship, which was in perfect condition. Opening up his shadow space, all of those that were in it were now released onto the land. The first thing they did was look around them to see if there were any beasts. Seeing the ship, though, they knew where they were. You decided to head to the ship, Your Majesty, after all. That was a wise decision, Ronston praised Quinn, unaware of the reality of the situation. To this, Quinn just smiled, before showing the Earl the crystal in his hand. I managed to obtain what I came here for, so let's get out. I don't know what will happen once I use it, so I'll have to ask you all to please look after me, the Vampire King said. Would you like to absorb the next crystal and upgrade the system? He headed on to the ship, and the others were checking a few things before leaving. They all looked at each other, wondering just how he had done it. Quinn had entered the main part of the ship, and finally he was ready. Yes, nest crystal is now being absorbed into your body. Immediately, Quinn felt a rush of energy course through his body, yet it wasn't a pleasant feeling at all. The energy was far too much for him to handle. It felt like someone was drowning his body in ki. His veins felt like they were bursting. It was so painful that Quinn could only let out a mighty scream. The other rushed into the ship once they heard it. What is going on, Your Majesty? Are you okay? Ronston asked. Don't touch me, Quinn warned, veins bulging up his neck. Just stay away, that's an order. Hearing this, Jesk was making sure that everyone stayed back, listening to his master's order, but the gorilla couldn't help and stared at the crystal behind him. Eventually, Jesk ran outside, trying to avoid doing something he didn't want to do. The energy felt familiar, yet not at the same time, and using what knowledge he had of ki, Quinn was trying to get a hold on it, so it wouldn't so vigorously rampage through his body. Unfortunately, no matter what he tried to do, the pain didn't seem to be residing. It was as if he had no other choice but to just accept the large amount of energy and let it run rampant through his body as it wished. Guys, I think we have a bigger problem. A wave of beasts has started heading our way, Mo exclaimed, staring out the window. The next second and the whole ship shook. I will look after His Majesty and keep an eye on him, while you get rid of the beasts, Ronston ordered. Heading outside, the group got to work quickly. These were ordinary beasts, not like what they had fought outside, but there were many, and in the distance, it looked like more were coming. Are they attracted to the nest crystal? What should we do? Joy asked. Get rid of the beasts and let's get out of here, Nian ordered. Mo, following orders, blood swiped his way through many of the beasts and rushed around the back, but he could see that the thrusters to the ship had already been damaged. With the ship incapable of flight, all they could do was communicate back to the others and ask for help. In the meantime, they were stuck here, and they had an army of beasts to deal with. Defend His Majesty and the ship until he is done with whatever he is doing, Norvik ordered, as he slapped his big belly a couple of times. That's all we have to do. Back in the ship, Quinn was thinking the same thing. He just had to get through this absorption stage, and then he would be able to deal with whatever was happening outside. Sitting in the same state, Quinn had no idea how much time had passed. The pain was making him lose all of his senses. He was scared that it would never end, but at some point, a message had finally appeared in front of him. Update. Absorption of the next crystal is now at 1%. The current rush of attack from the human and vampire alliance was in full swing against the Dalki. So far, nearly every planet and group were accomplishing their goals with ease, without having encountered too much trouble. Unfortunately, the Dalki's defense force was nevertheless strong enough to have all factions suffer casualties. At the moment, Sam and his group had just finished taking down the Dalki fortress in front of them. Dealing with the Dalki mothership itself was still a tricky business, but with users of the Shadow and each group having one crystal, each one should be okay. The only worry was that the group that entered had to be strong enough to either open up the ship from the inside to allow the others to come and join the fight, or to take down the system that would create the Dalki shield. For his group, he would be relying on Layla, who held the special storage crystal, along with Dennis, who knew how to use the Shadow well, and could also perform the Shadow travel. However, unlike Quinn's version, he could only take a few people with him, since his space was small. This allowed him to take Vincent along with him, who was a strong leader in many senses. Currently, Sam was standing in the destroyed fortress with the rest of the cursed faction, and vampires who were in on the attack. He was looking up at the mothership that was a little away. The others had already gone inside, and they were just waiting for them to act. "You look concerned," Logan, who was standing by his side, commented. He wasn't fully involved in the fighting as much as the others, but then again, he and Sam were busy trying to see the bigger picture of the war and react to any sudden changes. "I am," Sam admitted. "We've come far, but everything has been going far too smoothly for my liking. I had planned for so many variables, yet not one of them has occurred yet. It's as if they're just letting us retake our planets one by one." "I would take that as a good thing. Our power has increased, and I think they know it," Logan replied. "So far, the Dalki have always acted based on them being the stronger race, having the stronger forces that are able to overwhelm us. Maybe this time we have managed to overwhelm them." It was then that Logan brought up something, a hologram of the solar system that seemed to somewhat back up what he was saying. There looked to be little counters by each of the planets out in the beast solar system. "What is that?" Sam asked, intrigued. "Some time ago I went back to my parents' lab and used the knowledge gained from Richard to create something else. After creating the Demon Tier Beast finding system, I thought to myself, if it's possible to find those beasts, why can't I create something that would help us get a read on the Dalki energy? The energy reading of a single spike Dalki shows as 1. I have not enough data on a 2-spike or 3-spike Dalki, but they would certainly produce more energy than a 1-spike, giving out the reading of a higher number. I used my funds to create self-piloted ships that would drop off my devices on the planets. I'm sure it will be a while till they find them, since the Dalki are too busy dealing with other things. Anyway, although we can't use this energy reading to give us an accurate number of how many Dalki are on a single planet, it will at least allow us to see where most of the forces are." Looking at the numbers, they were all quite similar, as if equal forces had been placed on each of them. At the same time, many of the beasts' planets were showing no signal at all. "Are they planning to just defend?" Sam wondered. "It looks like they have set up defenses on 9 different planets, which is also equal to the number of attack groups we have. I was hoping your little energy radar would have picked up where Graham was. For now, all we can do is stick to the plan. The most important thing about this plan is to keep going forward. If one group gets left behind, we can't go back to help them. Otherwise it will leave the Dalki with an opportunity," Sam explained, as he looked back towards one planet that hadn't moved on from their position yet. The planet where Sack and Samantha were on. Unexpectedly, while one group seemed to be moving slowly, there were two who were moving faster than any of the others, blitzing their way through planet after planet, reclaiming what was once theirs. Rodero was a desert-like planet that had dark gray skies at all times throughout the day. Its gravity was around 1.5 times stronger than that of Earth. Yet for Peter, who stood on top of a slanted rock, looking outward toward the Dalki fortress that had been set up, this didn't seem to pose any problem. He stood, walked, and even ran as if everything was just fine, and the same was true for the vampires under his commands. Only the humans from the cursed faction were still having a little difficulty adjusting to it. "Don't worry, you guys rest for now," Peter shouted as he looked back at his relatively large army of around 10,000 or so. But at the front were the vampires and one of the vampire leaders, Jake Musket of the 6th family, along with his close family. "He's going to do it again," Jake smiled, understanding the meaning of their commander's words. Peter had shared his strategy of how he was going to help them win, and initially, Jake thought him to be slightly mad. The vampire forces numbered only in the hundreds. The Dalki were strong, and they knew that, but he was sure he would see the same spectacle as he did before. "Everyone, get ready to move on to the next planet. Make preparations," Peter shouted to the humans of the group, and they soon got to work. It was then that Peter began to run through the crowd, and in doing so, there were two others that were following him. A short while later, Peter started to run across the plain, hard desert, and so did the others, but they were a good distance away from Peter and the other two. Readying his fist, Peter charged ahead, in front of his two lesser whites, and immediately punched down the large gate in the fortress, shaking the whole place. The fortress had dented slightly as the chains had pulled back. Seeing this, Peter punched it again and again, each time pushing the gate bit by bit. The Dalki, seeing this, had decided to stop him by jumping down the walls, but before they could even reach him, 3 of them got sliced in half, their bodies falling to the ground. At the same time, on the other side, they had been struck right in the chest with a palm thrust, and the 2 went flying back. They'd been dealt with by a headless white. This time it looked a bit different, as it had body armor on as well. Through more testing, Peter had learned more about his lesser whites, and he didn't know if it was just something unique to him, but Hilston's body was still able to use the power of beast gear. His body was still as strong as it was before, and there was now this as well. However, during his conquest, there was something else Peter had discovered and learned. Throwing both of his fists back, a strange glow started to appear around them, and throwing them both at the same time, a stronger strike than before blasted the doors, swinging them off their hinges and hitting the Dalki that were standing just behind the door. Peter, who thought he would never learn such a thing, had learned some form of ki. The only strange thing was, he could only coat ki on his fists, and it was quite visible when he did so. It was a strange phenomenon, especially for someone who thought he had none, but Nate told him to just go along with it. Yet there was one more trick up his sleeve, as Peter placed his hand on one of the Dalki that had been killed by the door. "Wake up!" Peter shouted, and the body started to get up by itself. Peter placed his hand on another as well, the 2-spiked Dalki that was on the ground. "Wake up!" And the other Dalki rose. The 2 were lesser whites belonging to Peter. The white was now able to make more lesser whites than before, and had become a strong being that was able to match up to the previous Big Four with his powers and strength. With the large door down, the vampires came rushing in, as it was time for them to start their massacre. The second group that was also making fast progress came as no surprise, because this family was the
Helena
Quinn family,
Grazzo.
and they had
Hello,
just landed on
hello.
the first Dalki-owned beast planet. "We need to be careful," Forden cautioned those under his command, as he flapped his large wings on his back. "I have a feeling it won't be easy from here onwards." The planet that Sam was most concerned about was struggling for a valid reason, because right now, they were dealing with one of the most feared Dalki to all mankind, one of their leaders, Onehorn. A few moments ago, Sack, Samantha, Fex, and Linda were frightened about what they're about to face off against. They were worried that they wouldn't be enough to go up against such a titan. However, just as their worries were starting to take over, a ship could be seen in the distance, and crashing down from it were 3 figures that were there for support. The Headless Knight, Oscar, Mona, and by her side, a Dalki. With this support, the others were confident, and they were all waiting to see who would be making the first move. "Ha ha! Come on! I heard your name was Onehorn, right? Well, after today, you'll have to rename yourself Onehorn. Fex taunted the Dalkey leader as he realized his threads were aimed straight for the crooked horn that was on the Dalkey's head. Onehorn didn't regard them as a threat or anything he needed to worry about. He was ready to just break through the strings, but at the same time, everyone else took that as their signal to make a move. Mona had charged in with her Dalkey heading in first, and Sack had run around the side and jumped in at the same time as the Dalkey did, pincering Onehorn. Should we move in as well? Linda wondered. Not yet. All the 5-spiked Dalkey seem to have a special ability, and we still have no idea what his is. The best time to attack is when the opponent is trying to attack you. Samantha shook her head, as she could see something happening soon. Seeing the others move, Onehorn ignored the string, allowing it to be tied around his head, while at the same time, he punched Sack's leg, sending the Supreme Commander back through the snow, and punched the Dalkey at the same time, able to split his focus. Sack got up quickly from the snow, his leg throbbing and stumbling a little. Damn, it hurts this much from a single hit, despite my blood aura and hardening ability. Thankfully, my leg isn't broken this time. There needs to be a way to hurt him. However, the other Dalkey who had attacked at the same time and was a 3-spike was not in a good condition at all. The right side of its body was missing as green blood dripped from his body. It looked like it was already on its last legs, and the only reason it had survived was because Fex had pulled it slightly to the side. What a waste, Mona sighed, as she placed her hand on the Demon Tear amulet. Not long after, the Dalkey had fallen to the floor, the energy being transferred over to herself. She activated her beast equipment as well, knowing that they would soon be in for a brawl. Samantha, Fex, and Linda hadn't moved in after the pincer attack. They still felt like there was a chance for an opening, but Onehorn's counterattack had been too fast for them to find one. We have to get close, Linda said, as she inched towards Onehorn, while Mona on the other side charged in fully. If you're in danger, I'll try to move you out of the way with my strings. From back here, I can see things a little clearer than you two, Fex suggested, as he threw out his needles, piercing the 2 girls in the back. Agent 11 was still back in camp. The vampire was aware that he would hardly be able to do much to the Dalkey leader. As for his blood weapon, unfortunately there wasn't a good target to use it on. When Mona charged in, she had done so quite confidently, feeling stronger than she had ever done before. At the same time, she was making sure she was breathing correctly. Onehorn turned around, throwing out his leg behind to hit her, but she leaned back just in time, avoiding the hit, and moved in quickly, hitting him in the chest with a hook. In retaliation, Onehorn tried to chomp down on her, but by moving slightly and spinning to the side, she punched the Dalkey leader twice in the side quickly. The blows didn't look like they had hurt him much, but each time she successfully hit Onehorn, loud bangs could be heard by everyone watching. They all knew each strike had great power in them, and everyone was just amazed at how skillful Mona was. Right now, in a life-and-death situation, she was able to fight so calmly and skillfully. That is the power of the Big Four, all right, Sack smiled. We have to wait for the right time. The woman continued to avoid the strikes, but although Onehorn was getting pummeled, he didn't seem to have lost a single drop of blood. Eventually, Mona made a slight mistake, as she lost her footing in the snow, slipping slightly. This was the opportunity Onehorn had been waiting for, and his large fist aimed towards her head. Mona barely managed to place both her hands over her head. Crap, I messed up. A 5-spike Dalkey hit will kill me in one blow. Before the first hit Mona, though, the others had taken action. Both Samantha and Linda appeared by her side. With all their strength, they threw their fists towards Onehorn's, and at the same time, in the air from above, with his knee forward hitting the fist as well, was Sack. All of their strength striking at once still felt like it wasn't enough, but the 2 powers colliding had bought Fex enough time to act as well. Piercing her with a needle, he pulled Mona out of danger. The 2 girls could feel that the bones in their forearms had shattered, including those in their knuckles, but they still pushed forward, until they felt the strings pulling them away as well. With only Sack left, Onehorn's strength, although not at the power it was before, continued to push forth. It had sent the Supreme Commander flying through the air, once again crashing into the snow. Your little ants are only delaying the inevitable, Onehorn stated coldly. Why did you guys do that? Mona asked, now that she was out of harm's way. She then saw that their arms and the bones in their body were healing, recalling that neither one of them was human anymore. You don't have to worry about us so much, Samantha reassured her. We know we are not strong like you. You're one of our best chances at beating him, so you keep attacking him, and whenever we can, we will protect you from getting hit." At the same time, seeing that Mona really was their best shot and being the only human there, Fex had a suggestion as he pulled out the black needle from his body. "They should give you a bit of power boost. Don't worry, I won't try to control you. You're a better fighter than me, so I won't interfere." Quickly recovering, Sack stood up, his knees now shaking. "You call us ants, but we sure are giving you a hard time," Sack proclaimed. His ability, as well as his new vampire body, was giving him great strength, and he was putting up a much better fight compared to the previous time. "What else should I call you?" Onehorn questioned, stomping his foot. "Look at me. Despite all of you teaming up in your feeble attempt of bringing me down, you have yet to injure me to any meaningful degree. Tell me, how do you think you can kill me?" Sack just smiled back at this face. "You're right. We might be unable to. That's why we're counting on him." Sharp bones rose from the ground, piercing through the hard scale of Onehorn, going right through his legs. Turning his head, looking behind him, he stared at the armored being who hadn't even moved yet. Then, when looking at the dead Dalki, it no longer had a head on its body. Walking forward, there was a bone sword in Oscar's hand. "Ah!" Onehorn shouted, moving forward and breaking the bones that had pierced him. Part of them were still in his leg, but turning around he was now looking at who had done this to him, and he could see a familiar-looking head shoved right in front of his eyes with a strange smile. "What? How is that possible? Didn't I kill you already?" Onehorn shouted in confusion, before he even realized that his body was unable to move. The others had seen the Dullahan use his strange power to freeze his opponents once before, when this head made eye contact with one it wished to slay. The only thing was, the others hadn't expected that such a thing could work against the Dalki, especially the five-spiked Dalki leader. Yet they were all witnessing it right now. The muscles on Onehorn's body were tensing in an attempt to move. His calf was expanding and bulging, yet nothing was working. "What kind of freakish monster are you?" Onehorn shouted at the top of his lungs. A bone from the ground rose and held onto the head, making a hand at the end to grab it.
What's up?
I want some food.
Some food? What do you want? Some noodles?
Yeah.
Yeah? Alright, I'll make you some. I'll call you when they're ready.
Okay, and I also want to eat them in the room.
Okay, I'll call you when they're ready.
Okay, first, I need to put these magnets on there. Cool, thank you. Um,
Just like it had done the time before. At the same time, gripping onto the bone sword tightly with both hands, it looked like Oscar was ready. He swung it out towards Onehorn's neck. It was a clean hit, and at first the sword looked to be going through until it suddenly stopped. The veins on Onehorn's neck were showing even through his thick black scales. Green blood could be seen rising up in that area. No matter how much Oscar tried to push the sword through, it wasn't budging, despite his great strength. "Let me give you a hand," Mona shouted, as she came rushing forward. The woman jumped, kicking the back of the sword with her legs. This time, Mona had the black needle in her back, and power was surging through her body. She had the power of the amulet, her beast gear, and now a blood weapon. A loud bang was heard, and it pushed a sword around an inch further. More green blood started trickling down Onehorn's neck. "I see now," Onehorn stated as he grabbed onto the bone sword itself and snapped it with his large fingers. He quickly pulled out the shard of sword that was stuck in his neck and hurled it towards Oscar's head that was still being held by the bone. Before it reached it, though, Oscar had jumped in the way, anticipating the move, and the shard had gone right through his armor. It had stopped when hitting his flesh, but there was no blood dripping from his body. "I see, you really are a monster," Onehorn added, as he closed his eyes and moved his head slightly, looking away from the head. "That's not good. It appears as if he figured out that it only works on eye contact. Oscar's trick won't work again, and that might have been our only chance just now. However, if we can hurt him once, we can do it again," Mona thought, pushing off her two legs and going towards Onehorn like a rocket. She bashed into his back, pushing him slightly. At the same time, Oscar had retrieved his head, which was now by his side, forming a brand new bone sword in his hand. From the ground rising through the snow, several weapons appeared in the area. They were spears, axes, giant swords, and small ones, but each one of them looked to have been created from bones. Onehorn attempted to hit Mona, who was behind him, with a back fist, yet it missed and hit nothing but air. Despite her boost, she wasn't faster than the Dalki leader, just able to predict his moves when needed. It was tiring, and wasn't 100% perfect, and with an enemy like him, a single miscalculation could be the end of her. However, seeing Onehorn's strength, letting him live might spell the end of the human race. He wasn't feared as humanity's bane after the first war for nothing. Oscar barged into Onehorn with the side of his shoulder and tried to knock the Dalki down, who quickly took a swing for his chest. The sword had been grabbed and split apart once again for Onehorn to deliver a great punch to Oscar's head. It knocked off the helmet he wore. That went flying and landed far off into the snow. Now, where Oscar's helmet once was, a strange smoke could be seen appearing at the top of it. Grabbing another sword from the ground that he had created, Oscar swung a bone axe, hitting Onehorn in the ribs, chucking him back a few steps. Blood was drawn again, but none of the blows were deep enough to be fatal. "You ants are starting to seriously piss me off," Onehorn shouted as he punched his two fists together. He then started to claw at his chest, creating two more large scratch marks, allowing his body to bleed more, giving him a boost in power. When the axe had hit Onehorn's body, it had broken. Picking up a spear this time, Oscar hurled it towards the Dalki. Seeing this, he hesitated slightly before charging forward. Spinning his body, he avoided the spear and grabbed it. The next second, the Dalki had thrown it back towards his opponent. Mid-air, jumping towards it, was Mona, who attempted to grab onto the handle. It seemed like it did nothing as it took her along with the momentum. A few moments later, though, Sack, Linda, and Samantha were all standing behind, ready to catch her as her body hit theirs. It looked like Onehorn was going towards them, but before he could even reach them, Oscar was there, and this time, he held up his head in front of him. It stopped Onehorn's charge, slowing it down, causing the Dalki to close his eyes. At that moment, a giant hammer made of bones was swung down, hitting the top of his head. It crashed in the snow and against the ground, creating a large crater underneath, and even shook the shelter they were away from. Oscar was proving in this fight that his strength was no less than the 5-spike. When we all fought Onehorn last time, no matter what we used, he was able to overwhelm us, Samantha couldn't help but utter as she saw her father contend with his murderer. "Everything's changed," Zack explained. "None of us are human, for one. Or a single punch from him would have knocked me out of this fight. This time I've already taken a couple, and I can still keep going. This time there are more of us as well. Your father is a lot stronger." The second the bone hammer had crashed on top of Onehorn's head, it broke, but seconds later, Oscar picked up another one. The new weapon also smashed down on the Dalki leader, again with enough force to shake the ground. The crater got deeper underneath the two of them. Another hammer was formed, and it was thrown down again, making it even deeper, and large cracks began to appear. Snow was falling through the fissures that had been created. Not stopping again, a larger hammer was created, and it was thrown into Onehorn's head directly again, only this time, a hand was lifted above it. grabbing the weapon before it could reach its target. He pushed back against it, and soon another hand appeared to help the first one. Something was strange, though. Grabbing on the large hammer, all of Onehorn's fingers could be seen. It was almost as if his hand had gone bigger. From the ground, he grabbed the hammer with both hands, and by the second they realized that they weren't just imagining things. Onehorn was indeed growing in size. Blood spilled out of his mouth, but his size was getting bigger by the second. He was already a large 7 feet tall Dalky, yet he seemed to be growing even bigger. "This has to be it," Samantha exclaimed. "The special trait we were warned about." "Dad, get out of there," Samantha screamed at the top of her lungs. Now, Onehorn, he was 30 feet in height and was a colossal giant. Large Dalky wings sprouted from his back, and a tail started to grow as well. It wasn't special like Slicer's, but right now they were looking at a giant 5-spiked Dalky whose head could even tip over the shelter walls. "Holy crap, it's like what happened on those TV shows," Vex exclaimed. "Power blamers. Wait, why doesn't that sound right?" Looking down, Onehorn could see Oscar below him, smaller than his foot. He smiled before lifting it up and slamming it down on him. "This time I'll make sure you stay dead, Ant."
It's not ready yet. I'll let you know. You just toss that right in the trash.
The large foot slammed into the ground and chucked up the snow and pieces of the ground with it. It was clear that not only had Onehorn's size diminished, but his strength had drastically increased as well. Most of the others stumbled as the strike was unexpected, and as they lifted themselves out of the snow, Samantha looked towards the snow and could see Onehorn's smile. The large foot slammed into the ground and chucked up the snow and pieces of the ground with it. It was clear that not only had Onehorn's size changed, but his strength had drastically increased as well. Most of the others stumbled as the strike was unexpected, and as they lifted themselves out of the snow, Samantha looked towards the snow and could see Onehorn's smile. "No!" Samantha screamed and squinted her eyes. I... She was scared that she had lost her father once more. It was a pain that had taken a long time to heal, and Samantha wasn't even sure if she was actually over it. Seeing Oscar appear in his new form, how he had been with her, she had felt like a piece of her was slowly coming back. Samantha still felt guilty about the choice she had made at that time, but she couldn't deny that she enjoyed spending time with Oscar, even the way he was now. Closing her eyes, there was a striking pain in her heart. Suddenly they heard a loud neighing sound in the distance. Looking up, she could see that Oscar was now on top of his familiar. The large black horse spewed green mist out of its nostrils. "He's still alive," Mona finished the sentence, giving Samantha a hand and bringing her back up to her feet. "But that one needs to be killed." It didn't take a genius to figure out which one Mona was talking about. The Dalky leader that even those inside the shelter could now see. Seeing the large head made those patrolling the walls shake in fear. The battle was taking place around 200 yards away, but those from the Earthborn group were frozen still. "If that Dalky were to jump from there to here, it would destroy the shelter in a couple of hits," one of them uttered on the wall. Fortunately, it seemed that Onehorn was far more concerned with the surrounding ants. Seeing Oscar still alive, he thought he must have been imagining things. Lifting his foot up, there was only a large imprint on the ground with a few crushed bones from the weapons, yet no body, which meant that the figure on top of the horse was indeed the one he had been fighting so far. Angry, Onehorn attempted to swat the horse away, yet the familiar jumped over the large hand, moving at a speed that surpassed even most vampire leaders. Its feet hardly touched the ground, as it looked more like it was gliding. However, the power behind Onehorn's attack was so powerful that it created a wind force that managed to uproot the trees some distance away. How? How do we kill something like that? Vex gulped down hard as he looked up at the Dalki. He took back his black needle. He imagined Mona just had been getting tired of her blood being drained, and now instead he had placed it in himself. The Royal Knight immediately felt the surge of power, and he started to twiddle his fingers, making his red string go over each other again and again. "What are you planning?" Sack asked as he approached his side. "It's going to take a while, but I believe I can create a string thick enough to at least hold him in place. Honestly, I have no way to kill him. I can only tie him up and make him trip or something, and he might even still break out," Vex replied. "Still, keeping him in place might help the rest of you to somehow deal with him." The others were thinking hard as well, but could think of nothing. Seeing Vex like he was, they all felt like they couldn't just sit back without at least trying to help out. In the meantime, while the others were thinking, Oscar was taking action. He had brought out a bone whip. Galloping on top of his familiar, he had tried to wrap it around Onehorn's large leg quickly. Pulling on it, the bones pierced his hard scales, and green blood painted the snow. Unfortunately, it seemed to do nothing, as Onehorn simply lifted his foot and stomped down again. The bone whip broke, yet they still weren't getting closer to a solution.
Yeah.
Instead, it looked like Onehorn was going to act.
Hello.
He pulled back both of his hands, and shortly after, threw them down at the ground one after another. Unlike the stomps with his foot, these blows weren't slow by any means. Each fist hit the ground, creating large craters along with causing a piece of land to be thrown up. It felt like the whole planet was shaking with each hit. Eventually, one of the strikes even caused a pool of water to form in the crater. The others tried to get out of the range of the attack, as Onehorn seemed to be solely focused on Oscar. The Dullahan was constantly moving and still avoiding the strikes by Onehorn, but then the horse did something different. When avoiding one of the strikes, it looked to have galloped on the air itself. Hitting the air, it created a cloud of green smoke from its hoof. It continued to move upward as if hitting a solid wall this way. The horse was somehow flying, without actually flying. Now getting close, it made Onehorn's position slightly awkward. In Oscar's hand, he had formed quite the large bone spear. But something strange happened, and it was as if the bone itself had stopped forming before the spear could be finished. Once again, Oscar could no longer rely on his bone powers, somewhat similar to how ability users would run out of MC cells. Still, he threw the unfinished spear as hard as he could towards Onehorn. Bending down slightly, Onehorn allowed it to hit his forehead just to the side of where his horn would be. It had pierced its head but stopped short. Still, it looked like it had hurt him more than he had anticipated as he flapped his wings in anger. "Stop delaying the inevitable!" Onehorn screamed in frustration. Seeing this, the horse started to neigh in response, like it was scared or trying to say something. Back on the ground, watching everything and not being able to interfere, Fex's earrings started to glow, and a few seconds later, the little bull, Ham, appeared. Master, I have an urgent thing to tell you. It's the Horse King who wants to ask you all of a favor," Ham urgently said. "He says to keep the big monster occupied. Give him some time, and he'll be able to defeat it. Find a way to hold it still." Listening to these words, the others looked at each other. It was the only hope they had. Now, covering their faces from the heavy gusts of wind, they could see that Onehorn was following the familiar into the air. The horse quickly turned away and started to run through the air, leaving clouds of green smoke behind, yet the Dalki leader Onehorn followed. "No!" Sack shouted out. They're heading towards the shelter." The others quickly started running after, but were far too slow to keep up with the likes of Onehorn and the Horse King, even for a group of super beings. A short while later, still on their way, the whole ground shook countless times. They could only imagine what was happening, and when they got closer, they could see what was happening as well. The sound of screams were heard throughout, but it was being drowned out by rumbling and explosions of power. Eventually, the group had arrived, but it was not the same place they had come from. The walls had been destroyed. Dead bodies lay in the snow on the ground, too many to count. It looked as if not a single person had survived, in the middle of the entire shelter. Walking through the walls, none of the structures were what they used to be, and it was hard to imagine that a single person, out of their army of 50,000, had survived the onslaught. In the center, though, were two beings. Onehorn was no longer flying, and Oscar was there as well. Why? Why did he come to the shelter? He should have known everyone was here, Sack thought. Listening to this, and the fact that the horse had run in this direction, and what was ordered of them, Mona had some ideas, but she didn't want to say it. She didn't want to say what she thought, in case it wasn't true. Come on, Sack. You're our supreme commander. We need to kill Onehorn once and for all. We can't allow the sacrifice of everyone here to have been for nothing. Pick yourself up, and let's do the job that we came here to do. Mona's pep talk had snapped the rest out of their daze as they realized the real threat that was in front of them. But what could they do? Just how were they meant to hold Onehorn down and make him stay still? The horse once again started neighing, and Fex, not having put Ham away, nodded as he began to relay the information to the others. He's going to start the process now, so you all need to do something. Just keep him in the general area and make sure he can't fly, Ham translated. I think I can do something, Fex answered. I kept rethreading my string powers over and over. Honestly, I'm pretty exhausted, but I think this is the strongest string I have ever made in my life. While running, Fex had never stopped making string, even during the attack. He had wrapped it around his arm. It looked like he was carrying multiple thick scarves as the other end of it hung and touched the surface. To stop him moving, the two main things we need to wrap are his wings and legs. But I don't know how we're going to do that, Fex said, holding on to the string and pulling it a couple of times for good measure. I have a plan, Mona smiled, while staring at Onehorn. A few moments later, everyone was moving into action, heading towards Onehorn. Seeing this, it looked like Oscar was putting faith in his colleagues. For one, he jumped off the horse and landed on the ground. He jumped backwards a few times using his powerful legs. He jumped like a grasshopper towards the shelter, and quickly got away from Onehorn. Then, placing his head on the ground, he was ready to take action, placing both his hands on the floor. He was vulnerable right now, and if Onehorn hit him with a single hit, he would be done for. Regardless, he could see a group springing into action. The others were already in front of Onehorn before the latter could even react. First, the horse began to glide in the air, and he quickly charged towards Onehorn and headed towards its head. Seeing this, Onehorn opened its large mouth and just chomped down on the horse. The second he did, the horse turned into green smoke and spread everywhere in the surroundings. What is this? There's no blood! Onehorn was surprised and a little dizzy, as the green smoke had some kind of woozy effect on him. This is great! The familiar is helping us out. But with it just having died, it looks like it will no longer be able to help Oscar avoid those blows. This is going to be our only chance, Vex shouted, as he had a fraction of a string in his hand compared to moments ago and was getting ready to do his job. Being somewhat blind and in a daze, Onehorn was swinging rapidly, and someone chose to take this opportunity as she leapt upon Onehorn's arm. As he swung widely, Mona had to be careful and have a firm grasp of her balance. While he was swinging his arms trying to hit something, she had to hold on to some scales. Then when it stopped, she ran up the arm as fast as she could. It felt like Mona was playing some kind of game. At the same time, in her hand, she held a spear. Mona had got this from one of the dimensional storage boxes she had around her waist. Rarely did she use weapons, since her fists were always her choice, but once in a while, they would come in handy, depending on what type of beast she would face. Today seemed like their day. Tied around one of the spears was part of the string Fex had created. She hoped for her plan to work, but it would be tough. Finally, running up, she was on top of Onehorn's shoulder. He still seemed to be affected by the smoke, and now that she was also closer to the gas, she also was feeling its effects. Still, she quickly held her breath to not let it affect her anymore. Mona looked at the weakest part of the wing where the scales weren't as strong. She thought there was a chance. She wasn't exactly weak, so she hoped this would work. Hurling the spear towards the wing, the spear pierced through, but it was a lot like a dot on Onehorn's wing. Anyway, it wasn't exactly meant to hurt him. One down, more to go. I just hope the others will be okay. I don't know who has the hardest job out of this. It was then that Onehorn acted and suddenly began to flap his large wings again. It seemed like he was going to take off, perhaps return later when he was feeling better after healing, but the group had to hold him down at any cost, no matter what. And at this moment, Linda and Samantha came forward. They were the best option right now because of their strength, and their bodies also grew in size as shadows wrapped around them. Seconds later, the two had grown significantly in size and had armor around their bodies. Linda had kept both of their armor sets in her dimensional space for a moment like this. Linda ran to the closest leg of Onehorn, while Samantha ran towards the other one. It didn't take long for Samantha to evolve and get stronger with Linda as her teacher. At the same time, Linda, having been turned earlier by Quinn, was far stronger than she had realized. The two of them grabbed onto Onehorn's legs and began to pull him down. Their height came just up to his knees. Even though the two girls could be considered giants right now, they looked like dwarfs compared to Onehorn. "What is this?" Onehorn grumbled. He felt like his wings' coordination was quite off, as they weren't moving in sync with each other. This was because Mona was also busy doing her work, and so were the two boys. Mona tried to get Onehorn's wings in a twist using her weapons and the string. At the same time, on the ground below, the boys swiftly ran around him, trying to tie up the legs, especially around the knees, to avoid the girls getting tangled up in the whole thing. "It's working! Our plan is working!" Vex thought, as he continued to run around fast and was creating more red string just in case. He felt as if he was about to faint, as if real blood was leaving his fingertips instead of the blooded strings. Still, they weren't going to give up. It was only
Arcadia,
because of everyone's
what's up?
effort that they could keep Onehorn down, and they felt like if any of them made a mistake, Onehorn would escape.
Listen to my vampire
"Please,
system.
Oscar, finish him," Sack muttered to himself. While the others were busy holding Onehorn, Oscar had been doing something that the others, perhaps, never wanted to see. As he put his palms on the ground, flesh began to fade from all the dead bodies around him. Soon, only their bones remained. This process was slow and took a while to complete, so he needed the others to distract Onehorn. Now for the next step, their bones sank to the ground as well. They weren't just sinking. The energy from their bones was going to Oscar. From this, something gigantic was forming around Oscar's body. The bones encased around him, and soon it was nearly impossible to see the original Oscar. The bones clad around his head and continued to grow in size, and eventually he matched even Onehorn in size. It looked like a giant skull warrior was formed, and it had a single, huge, double-handed bone sword. Inside somewhere around the chest area was Oscar controlling such a creature. "I think this might be enough to finish the job," Vex smiled. Ever since Onehorn grew in size, the group was constantly thinking of a way to kill him. His large size wasn't just for show. He had gained great strength, and on top of that, whatever attacks they made on him, it was no different than a mosquito bite to him. In the end, they all had put their trust in the Dullahan, Oscar, who he claimed he, or at least his familiar, had away. It seemed crazy, but what other choice did they have? Now seeing what trick Oscar had up his sleeve, they looked at the giant skeleton warrior and couldn't help but have a sliver of hope that this was enough to deal with Onehorn, just because both were similar in size. "Hold him steady," Mona shouted as she jumped off the back of Onehorn. She had used her spears and the string to tangle the wings as much as possible, but they still needed to be somewhat held on with her hands, and it wasn't something she was confident in doing. Luckily, the knots and tangling of the string did most of her work, and she was just relieved the string was somehow holding out. "We need to let that giant skeleton deal with him. Only with him can we win this," Mona cried again. As the effect of the green smoke wore off, Onehorn noticed the giant soldier in front of him and began to come to his senses. He tried to move his legs, but Linda and Samantha put all their strength to hold him down. They dug their fingers hard into the scales, pulling downward as much as they could. If they were to break their concentration for an instant, they would take off along with Onehorn's legs. The giant soldier moved its sword in front of him. He then took a stance and started running across the shelter floor the next second. The skeleton was very heavy, as with each step, the ground shook and crushed whatever was beneath its feet. It charged forward and thrust the sword right at Onehorn's chest, but there was one thing that Onehorn could still move quite well and hadn't been tied up, and that was his hands. At the right time, Onehorn slammed them both, making a fist punching the sword from both sides. But the momentum of the skeleton prevailed, and the sword continued to push forward, piercing the Dalkey's chest. A great amount of green blood was sprayed out, gushed on the surface for the first time. However, Onehorn smiled as the sword came to a standstill and no longer went further in his chest. "I think maybe you all forgot something," Onehorn shouted. His voice so loud, their ears boomed. "Even in this form, the more blood I lose, the stronger I get." Onehorn pushed the sword out of his chest with his hands, and just when he was about to make a counterattack, he suddenly felt something strange on his leg. They were stuck in the ground, and he couldn't move them. With the string and the two girls, he could barely move. "Get off me!" Onehorn screamed, trying to force his leg upward. The thick strings looked like they were at their max tension, and a few of them began to snap. "My string," Vex said, collapsing on the ground. He had used his ability far too much, and was exhausted from running around the enemy. At the same time, the skeleton soldier took another swing, and the Dalkey threw out its fist.
Lunch hour is officially over.
To try and give more power.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. It is officially 1 o'clock.
Into its punches, but the two on the ground continued to hold on tight. Their fingertips were bleeding as they rubbed against the hard scales. "Keep holding on," Linda shouted. The sword clashed against the Dalkey's knuckles, cutting the skin slightly, but couldn't reach the bone before Onehorn flung it away again. "We need to get a clean strike somehow," Mona thought, looking up. It was at the moment, though, that for a split second, Samantha's fingers had lost grip. Now moving his legs somewhat more comfortably, more string broke off as Onehorn raised his leg. "No!" Samantha shouted. She jumped up, grabbed the leg again, and attempted to pull it down. "Get off my leg!" Onehorn shouted, and he immediately stomped onto the ground, shaking the whole area and causing Samantha to lose balance and fall on her back. Onehorn realized that he would need full momentum to defeat this skeleton. Intending to get rid of the ones causing him trouble, he lifted his leg and slammed it down on Samantha's body. She lifted her arms and pushed back the foot. She could see the scales, but for some reason, the strength didn't seem to be as much as she had expected. "Get out of here!" Sack shouted. He was now under the foot. Blood hardening was covering his arms as blood dripped out of his mouth. His eyes were almost bloodshot red. His bones and his strength were the only things holding up the body. Such a small figure was doing so much.
I'm going to stay on for another 10 minutes.
I don't understand how I'm able to do this either. Maybe it's similar to one of those situations where the mother lifts a car to save her baby. Anyway, get out of here. That's a direct order from your supreme commander, Sack shouted. Samantha didn't want to move, but then she thought that perhaps she could push Onehorn's leg from the side if she got out. She quickly rolled her body to the side and stood up, getting ready to push the leg. However, when she saw Sack, she noticed a smile on his face. With her now safe, all his willpower slowly disappeared. Holding up the leg of Onehorn for that long was already a miracle in itself. Even with his ability and vampire body, the pressure crushed his bones, and eventually, the foot had flattened on the ground, crushing Sack. "No!" Samantha shouted, as she willed up all the strength in her fist and punched Onehorn's leg as hard as she could. It caused it to twitch back slightly, and Onehorn looked down as he felt the unexpected impact. How strong is she? Onehorn thought he needed to get rid of her first, but in that split hesitation of thought, the skeleton had charged forward, looking to produce the same attack once again. The sword was already close to him, and was about to pierce his chest and through his heart. A moment of distraction was going to lead to his downfall, and there was no way to stop it. "If I'm dying here today, then I'm taking you with me," Onehorn shouted as he moved forward with all his strength, breaking all the string and pushing away Linda. He had run right through the sword, allowing it to pierce through his chest and heart, but not before using his own hand, aimed straight through the skeleton's chest, and he punched right through it. The bones shattered instantly, and a small figure was chucked out of the back, flying through the shelter. The whole skeleton began to crumble and fall to the ground, and the others felt as if their hope of defeating Onehorn was gone at that moment. However, Onehorn's body began to sway a few seconds later. The rest of the group moved out of the way as he fell on his back, crashing down in his gigantic size. He took his last few breaths until, eventually, he was no longer breathing. "Is it over?" Max broke the silence. I think it is, Mona said. The question is, at what cost? The shelter around them had been destroyed. Not a single person from it seemed to be alive. Samantha rushed over to Sack as she wanted to see his state, or whatever was left of him, as tears streamed down her face. We lost Sack, Fex eventually said in dismay. The two hadn't known each other for long, or had spent a lot of time together. But fighting side by side with someone as brave and strong as him, Fex hated to lose to Sack. But now, he was gone. I don't think that's the only one, Mona said, looking off in the distance where Oscar's body had landed.
She does. I don't know how she's comfortable, but she is. She looks like she's very uncomfortable, but also at the same time super comfortable. Like she's enjoying the position she's in. But if it were me, I'd be very uncomfortable. Yeah, right. She must get that from you.
The others stepped towards the large crater caused by Onehorn's foot. There were many craters in the shelter, but this one in particular was larger than the others, showing how much strength had been used in the attack. They hoped to give Sack the respect he deserved with a proper burial, especially since he sacrificed himself and was the Supreme Commander. It was something that others around the world would like to see. Unlike the others who had been absorbed by the Dullahan, there should have been something left, but when they reached the crater, they were stumped by the scene in front of them. None of them could recognize Sack. A red splat on the floor with the organs and bones completely flattened was in the center, and there was nothing left of him. Witnessing this made them all realize the reality of what they had been through. Samantha was still on her knees sobbing. She still couldn't believe that Sack would sacrifice his life for her. Why me? Samantha started to cry. We can't do anything about this one, but we should have at least check if the other one was alive, Mona conveyed as she was already heading to where Oscar was. On the other hand, Linda had decided to stay by Samantha's side. While Fex headed off with Mona, he wanted to stay with Samantha, give her words of comfort, but he didn't know what to say at this moment, and he himself was distressed as well. He felt like perhaps Linda would be adequate to comfort Samantha. Eventually, Mona and Fex came across the Dullahan. His body had crashed into a large pile of rubble. What was once a building was now just rubble with the Dullahan laying on top of it. Is he alive? Fex asked. There was never a heartbeat with Oscar in the first place, since he was an undead creature, so it was hard for Fex to tell just by looking at the body. The armor on him was destroyed, and his body seemed quite crushed. Not in the same way as Sack, but it was hard to believe that the Dullahan would be able to walk again. Fex eventually saw a round object not too far, looking around the area. Running towards it, he picked it up off the ground. It was Oscar's head, but it no longer looked like what it had once did, with half of it being crushed from its head and one of its eye sockets. The only thing that was still intact was the creepy smile. He walked back with the head in his hand, returning to Mona. "I think he's dead as well," Fex eventually said. "We lost a lot. The humans lost one who was strong enough to take out Onehorn is gone as well. While we were enough," Mona answered. "All of us took part in defeating Onehorn, and if he had continued to live, just look at this shelter. It's thoroughly destroyed. Onehorn would have gone planet to planet, destroying the shelters with ease, perhaps even halting the human race's progress compared to what it is now. And," Mona clenched her fist in anger, "maybe it's better that he's gone." "What do you mean by that?" They heard a shout from behind. Turning around, the two could see that Samantha and Linda had caught up to them. The former's eyes were glued to the head that Fex was holding. She stomped over, and he immediately handed it over as she snatched it from his hands. Samantha fell to her knees again, holding the head and bringing it into her chest as even more tears rolled over her cheek. She had already cried a lot when she had lost her father once, and now she was going through the same thing again. But soon, the tears of sadness were turning to anger. Raising her head, she stared towards Mona, who had said the earlier words. "What do you mean by that? What do you mean it's better that he died? Don't forget that it was because of him that we defeated Onehorn." Fex was wondering what to do. The one thing they didn't want now of all times was infighting, but he also couldn't comprehend the reasoning behind Mona's words. "For one, we all took part in taking Onehorn down. I believe if any one of us weren't here today, then he would have easily slaughtered the rest. And I don't want to say it, but can't you see what he did? Oscar came this way, and it was because of him everyone at the shelter died, including my people, whom I had brought here. If you haven't figured it out, Oscar uses the dead's bodies to utilize his powers. I understand that it was to take down Onehorn, but that doesn't justify what he has done, nor does it help me quell my anger and feel better for the ones I have lost." Honestly, Samantha hadn't actually thought a lot about what Oscar had done. She thought he had just run in this direction, but now looking around, she could see that there were no bodies at all. Where did all the 50,000 corpses in the shelter disappear to? "I'm sorry, but that man wasn't completely your father. I have spent more time with the new Oscar, at least more than you. Yes, a part of him was still in there, but most of him was a monster created by Richard Eno to help us win this war." It took some time for the rest to get a hold of the situation, and it was worse than they had thought. Zack, the Supreme Commander, was dead. The strongest force out of the Earthborn group was annihilated, and Oscar was no longer with them. So what were they supposed to do now? "Without the Supreme Commander, how will the Earthborn group function?" Samantha asked. "Now you are thinking a bit more with your head straight," Mona nodded. "With Zack gone, someone has to take over his role. This war is important. It's still hard to judge whether this is a victory or a loss for us, but we must continue with the plan, and someone has to lead them. Samantha, Oscar, and Zack, the past two Supreme Commanders, risked their life for you. They both deemed you as someone more important than themselves. You need to take up the role. Report to Sam everything that has happened. Plan, and lead the Earthborn group further. We need to win this war. We have already lost too much." Samantha thought about Mona's words. She wasn't as strong as Mona. She had kept suffering loss after loss, but she wasn't the only one. Everyone would suffer more losses if this war were to continue. You don't have to do this alone," Fex said, kneeling beside her and offering his hand. "I'll be there to help you. Even though I'm not like Zack or your father, I will stand beside you." Nodding to this, Samantha finally stood up and looked around at the entire shelter. It was time for them to make their report. Before leaving, Fex turned his head at the large Dalkey corpse of Onehorn. His body was still lying in the shelter, and it hadn't shrunken down in size at all. Linda, who appeared next to him, was also staring at it. At the same time, Mona and Samantha were making the report. "It's scary, right?" Linda said. "All the 5 spiked beings are this strong. Slicer, Onehorn, and there's still another one. It just makes me wonder if Onehorn was this strong and wasn't the leader, then how much stronger is Graham?" We don't know if Graham is stronger than Onehorn, and sometimes the leader isn't always the strongest, Fex replied. Also, I think having the large body here in front of us, filled with the blood of a 5-spiked Dalky, might benefit us a lot. While staring at the corpse, an idea had flashed in his mind.
Later, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good one. Be nice.